You read the article and you agreed with it. Completely. Every sentence landed like someone had put words to something you already knew was true. You shared it maybe, or you at least felt that specific satisfaction of having your view confirmed by something that looked like evidence. You moved on with your day, feeling a little more certain than you did before. Here's what you did not notice. You did not notice the 3 paragraphs you skimmed. The ones where the argument got complicated, where the data pointed sideways instead of forward. Your eyes moved across those words, but your brain had already filed them under irrelevant and kept scrolling. You did not notice that the counter-argument in paragraph 7, the one the author included to seem balanced, struck you as obviously weak, almost not worth addressing. You did not ask yourself why it seemed weak. It just did. And you did not notice that 2 days ago you read a different article making the opposite case and felt vaguely irritated by it, closed the tab, and forgot it existed by the time you had lunch. You thought you were reading. You were actually looking for permission. This is not a story about people who are stupid or lazy or politically brainwashed, though it can look like all 3 from the outside. This is a story about a system running inside your skull right now, quietly and efficiently sorting every piece of information you encounter into 2 piles. The first pile is things that confirm what you already believe. Those get processed smoothly, absorbed easily, and remembered longer. The second pile is things that challenge what you already believe. Those get scrutinized harder, dismissed faster, and forgotten sooner. The system does not announce itself. It does not feel like bias. It feels like thinking. Psychologists have a name for this: confirmation bias. But the name undersells it. Bias sounds like a tilt, a slight lean, something you could compensate for if you were careful enough. What the research actually shows is more like a full architectural feature of how the brain processes reality. This is not a bug in an otherwise rational system. This is load-bearing. Here is why the brain does this. Because the why matters more than the label. Your brain is the most expensive organ you carry. It accounts for roughly 20% of your body's total energy consumption, despite being about 2% of your body weight. And thinking, genuinely updating your beliefs, genuinely weighing evidence and revising conclusions is one of the most expensive things it does. Every time you encounter a new piece of information that contradicts an existing belief, your brain faces a choice. It can do the expensive thing, reopen the whole question, re-examine the original evidence, weigh the new information against the old, and potentially rebuild a conclusion from scratch. Or it can do the cheap thing, find a reason the new information does not count, file it as unreliable or irrelevant, and move on with the belief intact. Across thousands of decisions a day, the brain is going to default to cheap almost every time. Not because you are irrational, because you are efficient. Peter Wason figured out a clean way to watch this happen in a lab setting. In 1960, he designed what became one of the most replicated experiments in cognitive psychology. He gave participants a sequence of 3 numbers, 2, 4, 6, and told them it followed a rule. Their job was to discover the rule by proposing other sequences and being told whether each one followed the rule or not. Then they could guess. Almost everyone did the same thing. They formed a hypothesis immediately, usually something like the rule is even numbers increasing by 2, and then they tested sequences that confirmed it. 4, 6, 8, yes. 10, 12, 14, yes. 100, 102, 104, yes. Then they announced the rule with confidence. And they were wrong. The actual rule was simply any 3 numbers in ascending order. If they had tested a sequence that violated their hypothesis, like 2, 4, 5, they would have found that out immediately. But they did not test sequences that violated their hypothesis. They tested sequences that confirmed it, over and over, until they felt certain. Then they guessed. Then they were wrong. That is you. That is not an insult. That was also the graduate students in Wason's study, people who had dedicated their lives to rigorous thinking. The bias does not check credentials. And here's the part that should genuinely stop you for a second. Research suggests that people with stronger analytical skills are sometimes more susceptible to this pattern, not less. Because the smarter you are, the better you are at generating justifications for the conclusion you already reached. High intelligence does not protect you from confirmation bias. It gives you better ammunition to defend against information that threatens your existing beliefs. You are not reasoning more carefully. You are rationalizing more effectively. Those two things feel identical from the inside. So sit with that for a moment. The confidence you feel when you evaluate a piece of evidence and find it convincing. The clarity you feel when someone makes an argument and it immediately seems weak to you. The certainty you feel when you have thought something through and arrived at a conclusion. None of those feelings are proof that you evaluated things fairly. All of them are consistent with a brain that had already decided and then went looking for reasons. The feeling of thinking and the feeling of believing are almost impossible to distinguish from the inside, because most of the time the thinking is happening in service of the believing. This is where it gets worth paying attention to, because what Wason showed in a lab with number sequences is happening to you constantly in situations where the stakes are real. The colleague whose feedback you brushed off, the investment you feel good about, the person you decided early was not trustworthy and who you have been quietly building a case against ever since, the career path you chose and then surrounded yourself with people who told you it was the right call. In all of those situations, your brain was running the same program it ran in Wason's task, forming a conclusion fast, then testing only what confirms it, then arriving at certainty, then feeling like you got there honestly. The trap is not that you have confirmation bias. Everyone does. The trap is that it feels nothing like a trap. It feels like being right, so your brain is running a protection racket on your own beliefs. Now you need to understand exactly how that racket operates, because knowing it exists is not the same as knowing where it hits you. Start with the machinery. The brain is not trying to find the truth. It never was. What it is trying to do is keep you functional. Without burning through energy it does not have to spare. Forming a new belief from scratch, genuinely reconsidering something you have already decided, costs more than almost anything else your brain does. It has to pull up the original evidence, weigh the new information against it, manage the discomfort of uncertainty, and potentially dismantle a conclusion that other beliefs are already built on top of. That is an expensive demolition job. The brain would rather patch the wall and call it solid. Daniel Kahneman spent decades mapping this. He called the low-effort path cognitive ease. When information is familiar, when it confirms what you already hold, it processes smoothly. It feels clear. It feels true. Not because it is more accurate, but because your brain recognized it and waved it through without inspection. Confirmation does not feel like a shortcut. It feels like clarity. That is the trap inside the trap. Peter Wason showed you the mechanism in 1960. Now here's what happened after Wason, because the number task is clean, but you need to understand what this looks like when the stakes are real. Charles Lord, Lee Ross, and Mark Lepper ran a study in 1979 that should genuinely unsettle you. They took two groups of people, those who supported capital punishment and those who opposed it. Then they gave both groups the exact same evidence, not cherry-picked evidence, mixed evidence. Studies that supported both sides presented together equally. What they expected, reasonably, was that both groups would become a little more moderate. They had seen the other side's data. They had to at least partially update. That is how rational evaluation is supposed to work. That is not what happened. Both groups rated the evidence that supported their prior view as more rigorous, more credible, and more persuasive. Both groups rated the contradicting evidence as methodologically flawed. Same data, opposite conclusions about its quality. And when it was over, both groups had become more extreme in their original positions than when they started. Not more moderate, more entrenched. The balanced evidence made the disagreement worse. This is called attitude polarization. And it means something important and uncomfortable. More information is not always the solution. Handing someone a well-sourced, carefully balanced account of a contested topic can deepen their existing conviction rather than soften it, because the brain does not evaluate the information neutrally. It audits it. Evidence that fits gets approved. Evidence that does not get sent back as defective. And the stronger your prior belief, the more aggressively that audit runs. Think about what that means for every argument you have ever had where you came armed with facts. You are not changing minds. You were triggering the audit, and they were doing the same thing to you. This is also why social media is uniquely good at making everyone angrier and more certain simultaneously. The algorithm is not trying to radicalize you. It is trying to keep you engaged. And confirming information is more engaging than challenging information. So the feed fills with confirmation, and the audit barely has to run because almost nothing suspicious gets through. You are not being shown the world. You are being shown a mirror of what you already believe, at volume, on a loop, and it feels like being informed. Now, where does this actually cost you? Because laboratory studies are one thing, your life is another. Think about the last job interview you gave someone. Research by Dana, Dawes, and Peterson found that interviewers form a strong impression within the first 90 seconds of meeting a candidate. 90 seconds. Before the candidate has said anything substantive, before any real information has been exchanged, the interviewer has already reached a verdict. What happens for the next 45 minutes is not an evaluation, it is a confirmation search. A confident handshake and a good opening line gets a brain looking for reasons to hire. A nervous start and an awkward silence gets a brain looking for reasons to pass. The same answer to the same question lands completely differently depending on which search is running. You think you are assessing people. You are defending first impressions. Think about money. Investors who hold a position watch the news differently than investors who are neutral. Bad news about a holding gets rationalized. Good news gets amplified. Analysts have documented this pattern repeatedly. Investors losing positions far longer than the evidence justifies, because every piece of data that suggests they were wrong gets filed under misleading or short-term noise, while every piece of data that suggests they might still be right gets filed under exactly what I expected. The financial cost of this is real and it compounds. The bias does not just cost you one bad decision, it costs you every week you spend defending that decision against information that was trying to help you. Think about the person in your life you decided was unreliable. Maybe they were. But after that decision, watch what happens to every neutral thing they do. They cancel plans once and it is proof. They show up on time and it barely registers. They do something genuinely impressive and you find a reason it does not count. You are not observing them anymore. You are prosecuting them with evidence you are selecting in real time. And here's the part that makes all of this genuinely serious. Confirmation bias is measurably worse when the stakes feel highest. The more emotionally invested you are in a belief, the harder your brain fights to protect it, which means the decisions where you feel the most certain, the ones where the answer seems obvious, where you cannot imagine being wrong, those are precisely the decisions where the bias is most likely running at full strength. Your certainty is not proof of accuracy. Your certainty is a symptom. The stronger it is, the more worth questioning. This is not a comfortable thing to sit with, but discomfort is the point. The map of where this hurts you is also the map of where you can start doing something different. And that is where this gets useful, because the bias cannot be turned off, but it can be interrupted, structurally, deliberately, with specific moves that force your brain to engage with the information it is trying to filter out. The question is not how to become unbiased. Nobody gets there. The question is how to catch the audit running and make it do its job honestly instead of running protection for a conclusion you reached before the evidence arrived. So here's what you can actually do about it. And this is where most people get it wrong, because the instinct is to go looking for more information, read more, research harder, find better sources. That feels like the responsible move. It feels rigorous. But the research says otherwise. The problem was never the volume of information. The problem is the question you ask when you look at it. More information fed into a biased filter just produces more confidently wrong conclusions. You do not need more data. You need different questions. First move, steelmanning, not straw manning, which is what your brain does automatically, finding the weakest version of the opposing argument and knocking it down. Steelmanning is the opposite. Before you decide, you build the strongest possible case for the position you are about to reject. Not a caricature. Not the dumbest version of it that makes your side look obviously correct. The strongest version. The one that would be genuinely hard to argue against. If you cannot construct that version, you do not understand the disagreement well enough to have a confident opinion about it yet. That is the test. If your mental model of the opposing view is something no serious person actually holds, your brain has been doing the filtering work already and calling it thinking. This is uncomfortable to do honestly. That discomfort is the point. It means you are making the audit run on something it would rather wave through. Next, the pre-mortem. This one was developed by psychologist Gary Klein, and it is one of the most practically useful things in this entire conversation. Standard planning asks, how does this succeed? The pre-mortem asks something different. Assume it already failed. You made the decision, you committed, time passed, and it went badly. Now work backward. Why did it fail? What went wrong? What did you miss? What did you tell yourself would not be a problem that turned out to be the whole problem? You are not trying to predict failure. You are trying to force your brain to take the exit it keeps passing. Because the audit never runs on failure scenarios in advance. It runs on success scenarios. It looks for reasons things will work. The pre-mortem makes you look for reasons they will not, before the cost of being wrong has already landed. Use this before any significant commitment, a hire, an investment, a major conversation you are planning to have, a business decision you feel good about, especially if you feel good about it. Remember, the stronger the certainty, the harder the audit is working to produce it. Now here's the question that cuts through faster than almost anything else. Instead of asking what supports this, ask what would have to be true for me to be wrong. Not could I be wrong, that is too easy to dismiss. Specifically, what would the world have to look like for my current position to be the incorrect one? What evidence would exist? What would I be seeing that I am currently not seeing? Force the brain to generate the shape of disconfirming reality instead of letting it stay permanently focused on the shape of confirming reality. This single question, asked seriously, does more damage to bad decisions than hours of additional research looking for support. It sounds simple. It is. The hard part is remembering to ask it at exactly the moment you feel like you do not need to. If you make decisions with other people, there is a structural move that matters here. Designate a devil's advocate. Not informally, not as a culture of, oh, we welcome disagreement, but formally. One person whose explicit job in this meeting or this decision is to argue against the preferred option. The reason this has to be formal is social. Dissenting in a group where everyone else has converged on an answer carries a real cost. You look difficult. You slow things down. You risk being wrong publicly. So people stay quiet. They let the confirmation cascade run because the social price of interrupting it is too high. A formal devil's advocate removes that cost. Their job is to disagree. Nobody reads it as obstruction. And suddenly the argument against the decision gets made by someone who is actually trying instead of being filtered out before it reaches the room. Last. And this one compounds over time in a way the others do not. Keep a decision journal, not a diary, not feelings, reasoning. When you make a significant decision, write down why. What you knew at the time, what you weighed, what you were uncertain about, what you expected to happen. Then, months later, go back and read it. This is one of the only ways to catch your own brain rewriting history, because it will. Memory does not store the past accurately. It reconstructs the past in light of what you now believe, which means if the decision worked out, your memory edits it to look like you saw that coming. If it went badly, your memory edits it to look like you had doubts all along. The journal is immune to that rewrite. It shows you exactly what you thought, when you thought it, before the outcome colored everything. Over time, it shows you your own patterns. The kinds of decisions where your confidence correlates with accuracy, and the kinds where it does not. That is information your brain would never generate on its own, because your brain is not keeping honest records. It is keeping flattering ones. Now step back, all the way back to where this started. That article you read and immediately agreed with. That feedback you brushed off. That decision you felt certain about. You were not being careless in those moments. You were being defended. Your brain was doing exactly what it was built to do. Protect existing beliefs from the metabolic cost of revision, process confirming information smoothly, and flag challenging information for rejection, and generate the feeling of careful thinking as a byproduct of that protection. You were not thinking badly. You were running an efficient system that was not designed for accuracy. It was designed for stability. That distinction matters. This is not a character flaw to be ashamed of. It is an architectural fact to be accounted for. The brain is not a truth-seeking machine. It is a belief-protecting machine. And that machine served your ancestors well enough to get you here. But you are not navigating a savanna where fast pattern matching and loyal conviction kept you alive. You are navigating investments and relationships in careers and information environments specifically engineered to exploit the audit. The machine needs a manual override, not constantly, not for every small decision, but for the ones where being wrong will cost you something you cannot get back. The certainty you felt at the start of all this, that quiet confidence that you were reading carefully, evaluating fairly, thinking clearly. That feeling has not changed. It never announces when it is wrong. It just sits there, solid and familiar, while the audit runs in the background, waving through everything that agrees with it and turning away everything that does not. You cannot turn the audit off, but you can walk around it. You know the questions to ask. You know when the system is most likely running protection instead of running truth. You know that the stronger the certainty feels, the more worth examining it is. That is not a small thing. Most people never get that far. They spend their whole lives inside the filter, mistaking its output for reality, wondering why the people who disagree with them are so obviously irrational. You are not most people. Not anymore. You have seen the filter. And now, every time that quiet confidence settles in, every time something feels obviously true and the other side feels obviously weak, you have a choice the audit would rather you not make. You can look through the filter, or you can look at it. That choice, made consistently in the moments that matter, is the difference between a brain that protects what you believe and a mind that actually earns it.